Hello and welcome to the RevRx podcast, where we talk about success in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host, and I'm excited for you to meet our special guest today, Philip Pape. Philip is a coach. He's a podcaster. He's in the fitness world as an influencer. And one of the things you're going to like about him is that he prioritizes working smarter and not necessarily just working harder. You see, the truth is many of us know that we need to prioritize fitness. We need to lift weights. We need to walk more. We need to move around. But we're not sure where to start because the fitness industry tells us that we need to all become bodybuilders and spend 3 hours in the gym. And let's face it, that's just not feasible. So what we talk about in our conversation today is what we as normal human beings can do to start prioritizing our fitness in our lives. We talk about some strategies and some tactics that you can implement starting today that will help you live longer, that will help you live better, and that will help you feel your very best. We talk about the effects of aging, how many of us are going to lose large parts of our muscle mass as we age, and what we can start doing about it today. And we talk about the fact that most of us want to think down the road about playing with our grandkids and being healthy when we're in our 60s and 70s and 80s, and how if we want to do that, we've got to take steps today to ensure that that's the reality in years to come. So without further ado, I introduce to you my friend Philip. You're going to want to listen to this one from start to finish. There's so much good stuff here. And I hope that it encourages you to start living your best life today. Thank you so much, Philip, for joining us today on the RevRx podcast. Man, what a privilege it is to have you here to just have a conversation about health and fitness.
The privilege is all mine. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yes, sir. So, Philip, you're in the coaching space, and you're in the podcasting space too, which I love and appreciate. A lot of what you're trying to do is a little bit revolutionary when you think about it. I listen to fitness podcasts. I listen to a lot of this bodybuilding type stuff, and I'm of the belief that everybody can't just completely pivot their lifestyle. People are like me, man. People are probably like you. You're busy, you got a family, working a job or two, active in church and hobbies and different kind of things. But what you do is really kind of bringing in, and I love this, the wits along with the weights. Okay, the smart, efficient, data-driven approach to health. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to health and how that's a little bit different than what we see in the mainstream industry? Yeah,
you're exactly right, man. Because I'm an everyday dude. I'm a father of 2 daughters. I started to get the dad bod and was concerned not only with how I look for my wife, but but also for my health. And like everyone else, there's so much information, and even if it were all correct, which we know that's not the case, if you just try to figure it all out and then apply it, it's like a course of study. It's like getting a degree. And it took me years to kind of in a serpentine way, get around to understanding what actually does work according to the evidence and the science, and then start to apply and test it out on myself. But I'll tell you what, I spent many hours, weeks, months doing that through the pandemic and on into 2021. And I got to the point where I was like, if I could just get people kind of the shortcut to the information, they can then figure out, okay, how do I use that information? But that's not enough, right? Because knowing what to do is fine. We're all different though. We're all so unique. Right. We're all busy in different ways. So how do you then apply that to yourself? So that's where I said, how do we combine these together? Be intelligent about it. Most people listen to my show, they're probably highly educated. They're probably professionals. They don't want to waste all this time. They're like, Philip, you did the information research, dump it on me, but help me figure out how to actually make it work. So I'm big into that.
I love that because, you're right. There is so much information out there. In parentheses, I'm going to add misinformation. There's, it's hard to know what to believe. It's hard to know what to trust. It's hard to know what's fact versus fiction. And so you have to really kind of pick and choose the people you listen to, the information and the evidence behind that. I'm a clinical pharmacist, so I'm very much driven by scientific evidence. If the studies play it out, if it's a well-designed study, then hey, we can run with that. But there's a lot of problems with a lot of those studies, and some of it's just not even based on science at all. Whenever we hear nutrition advice, whenever we hear fitness advice, what's the best way to test that out and see what's true and what's not?
2 things come to mind, honestly. One is finding people you trust by getting exposed to a lot of information, but then having that critical thinking hat of coming through your filter and comparing what different people say and say, does this really make sense? And usually if it's anything extreme or anything new or anything that's like, you've never heard this before, this is the secret, this is the one thing, that's where you have to get extremely skeptical. And I'm a skeptic at heart, but I encourage my listeners to develop skepticism.
Sure.
The other half of that is when you talk about evidence, to me, evidence isn't scientific articles. That's one little slice of evidence.
Right.
It's everything that gives you information about what works. And the biggest evidence is yourself.
Yeah.
And people are not often willing to just test and experiment. And so people get frustrated. They'll reach out with a question. And first of all, I'll say, it depends. And second, I'll say, have you tried it?
Yeah.
Like, and they're like, but wait, you're the expert. I'm like, okay, I will validate that what you're suggesting can work.
Right.
And I'll go try it. like put it into action for 2 weeks, collect these 3 data points and tell me if it worked. And if you're too kind of, I'm not going to say lazy, but if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to be stuck for a long time, until you figure that out.
I like a lot of what you said just then. Really, really solid advice. Realizing that, hey, there is evidence out there, but it's a snippet, right? It's not the total picture. And, kind of piggybacking on that, this realizing that because something can work doesn't mean it will work with you. In other words, essentially what we're saying here is that there's no one size fits all plan out there. Health, fitness is very much a customized approach. So yeah, being able to, I like one of the things that you said was, if it's new, if it's, hey, this is the one thing, if it's extreme, question that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we're drawn to that. We're like, oh man, this guy has the secret. This guy, he's saying that this is the one thing I can do. And usually it's claims that sound too good to be true. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I play on that a little bit from a attention grabbing perspective with some of my podcast titles because you've got to get attention.
Sure.
One of my episodes coming up, I just recorded today, is like my 3 new dieting methods for easier, faster fat loss, right?
Yeah.
But underlying it is the principles that never change of personalizing the way that you consume calories for you so that it works with your schedule and your training and all of that. And then I give you 3 creative ways to do that out of a million that you could possibly come up with. And then you're like, okay, now I get it. But to grab the attention, you're like, this is new. This is different. This is, so.
Well, yeah. And when you look at the nuts and bolts behind some of that though, that's solid.
Yeah.
And when you hear, when you hear a couple of people out there that are reputable, that are saying the same thing, that to me, that's kind of a validation, like, all right, well, this is played out in several different places. And so that's helpful. But yeah, just, one of the biggest things that I think that we face is what's the secret to health? And, I don't want to oversimplify this, but I think there is no secret. There is no hack. It's just about being smart, which is why I like what you're doing, being smart, but then also putting in the work. And so, that's a lot of what you're doing. Getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty though. So, somebody like me, all right, busy guy, dad of 3, you're a dad, everybody faces that period in life where, okay, you start gravitating towards meeting others' needs instead of your own. We start taking care of the kids. We start, kind of neglecting ourselves a little bit. We start getting the dad bod, right? A lot of people listening, I think, can relate to that. And even females out there. You start changing your priorities in life, and now suddenly you're not the priority, and you kind of let yourself go a little bit. Well, then when we start thinking about getting healthy, one of the biggest barriers that I've experienced, and that a lot of the other people that I've spoken with in my coaching practice and other professions, one of the biggest barriers seems to be, all right, I can't go all in like I know I'm supposed to go in, right? So it's hard to go from 0 to 100. It's hard to become, realistically, what is that going to look like? So that's where you come in. You mentioned that's kind of your ideal client. That's your average client is, all right, busy life, not going to spend 3 hours in the gym every day. What does it look like to pursue health? What does it look like to try to get that physique that you want? What does it look like to become more fit? when you can't go 100% all in bodybuilder, that sort of thing? What does that look like for you with your coaching?
I'm going to give you the one-liner, and then I'll expand on it. The one-liner is, we need to reframe the idea that you need to go all in, right? You don't need to be at 100%. And it's actually even more profound than that, because going back to evidence and studies and everything else, if we look at, for example, lifting weights, 80% or so of the results come from just getting in the gym and doing one hard set of one exercise. Like going from 0 to that gets you 80%, and then the rest is the 20%. Wow. So it's not just non-zero days. It's doing something at all gets you way beyond 0.
Yeah.
It's super powerful, because then when it comes to gym time, when it comes to meal flexibility, when it comes to calories, when it comes to anything, sleep, you have a huge amount of tolerance, and you just got to go from this level of kind of lack of habits, lack of discipline, lack of any structure, to a little bit of that and thinking about it, and then just doing it. And I say just doing it. There's a whole mental aspect to that, which we can talk about. And there's a whole bunch of tools and habit building tools we can do. But that's it. It's like, it does not take very much volume. It's a minimum effective dose, just like with medicine. I know you're a pharmacist, to get almost all the results you could ever want.
Yeah. And that's really, really powerful. Like you said, it's just that it's a mental hurdle that we must get past to realize, I don't have to look like this. And, the mainstream fitness industry, I think, has painted that picture for a long time. Not necessarily purposefully, but that's, you see these gyms that are open, and you see these guys that are, just absolutely ripped. And you're like, okay, well, there's me, and then there's that guy, and there's not a lot of in between. So, how do I look like that? Well, that's not always the goal. And so one of the things I really like that I've been reading about you and a lot of the work that you're doing is you have this phrase, a lot of guys want to look like they lift weights. I really like that. I resonate with that. Can you talk about that, where that phrase came from, and kind of what your approach is to help a guy who wants to look like he lifts weights?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I didn't, make it up. The phrase "look like you lift." It's kind of been around the internet. But people, even with your shirt on, you don't want to have that frumpy, kind of fluffy, scrawny little look as a guy. Usually we want to look big and strong. And it's not about the 6-pack abs, guys, especially when you're like in your 30s and 40s. Who you're trying to impress? Girls aren't impressed by that anyway, even if you are single. But I mean, maybe a few are. So ladies, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've talked to a lot of you. So, looking like you lift is a mantra that you're putting in effort and you're putting in lots of hard work, but you're not getting the physical result. And at the end of the day, even though we have value-based goals, like I want to be the protector and provider for my family, I want to intimidate my daughter's girlfriends when they get old enough, like I do have that as a goal.
Yes. And amen. Right.
At the end of the day, like we have those value-based goals, but we always tie them to other things as well. The expression of our athleticism and how we look is one of those. And we have to bring it back to the day-to-day, the process-based, the action-oriented goals that get us there.
Sure.
Now, as far as looking like you lift, like that's a simple thing to understand. You want to have big traps. You want to have a broad back. You want to have upright posture. But all of that's associated with good health as well, and good, function. And as we get older, you don't want to be the 80-year-old hunched over. You want to be like, you want to look 60 when you're 80 or look 50 when you're 80. So it's kind of tied up with all that culture, but I think it can be very positive when used in the right way.
Absolutely. And it's not just a vanity metric. Right. It's not just, a lot of times we think, I want to look this way. I want to look this way. And, really, I think that the truth behind that is that we want to be healthy like that. We think that being healthy looks a certain way. And sometimes that's not necessarily the case, but it gives us something to work towards and gives us something to kind of strive for. So, thinking about, all right, so I want to work out. I want to do something. And you mentioned that, you don't have to go to 100. Something is better, is exponentially better than nothing. So we're starting to implement a plan. What would you say is part of the mindset aspect of this? So you mentioned, just doing the work, it's not that easy. What is it about mindset that we must get and really just, thinking about making it part of our lifestyle, making it part of a habitual thing for us when we don't have a lot of margins, but we know that it's important?
Yeah. I mean, mindset's a huge topic, right? And we can talk about the unconscious mind and all of that. But when it comes to lifting weights, or really anything where you're trying to grow and get an output, an outcome, I think it does help to, instead of focusing on how you're going to look in a year or losing 20 pounds or whatever, to break it down into action-oriented goals, right? And I like daily action-oriented goals, and I like multiple of them so that I'm constantly winning. Even if I only get 7 of my 10 goals done for the day, or 3 out of my 10, I've won 3 times.
Right.
And those goals, here's the magic of it. Once you do something very simple, that's binary, that's easy to do. I went for a 10-minute walk after my lunch. I did it. It's like a dopamine hit from that win. And that gives you the motivation because the result came from your action. Yeah. It's as simple as that. It's like you do it, it gives you a result. It worked. I'm going to do it again. And that's really the fundamental premise of building habits, right? Atomic habits. That's where the term came from. Atomic, like one little binary thing. Yep. So mindset is something that comes out of your actions, not something you get to help you take action.
Wow. And so one of the things you'd mentioned, you have these 7 things. I don't know if you have exactly 7, but what are those for you? What does that look like for you? Can you just give us a quick example?
Oh, I see the micro habits. Yeah, sure. So I know I'm going to train 4 days a week. And when I go to the gym, I'm going to have my workouts, my sets, reps, loads ready to go. And I know what my goal is. I know that, when I'm doing the barbell row this week, I'm going to do 225. Last week I did 220.
Okay.
As soon as I get that, that's a win. Now, if I don't get it, I learn from that as well. Mm-hmm. And one thing you don't do is learn when you don't attempt. Like if you don't attempt something, you're never going to learn.
There's nothing to learn.
So even the attempt and the fail is still a win in my book. So that's like one. Another might be I track my macros and calories every day.
Okay.
We can get into food stuff. You don't have to do that, but the more you track, the more data you have to act upon. You can make more informed decisions.
Sure.
I track my body measurements. I track my biofeedback. I track my steps, right? There's all these little things, and everything's associated with a micro action that gives me a win.
Yeah, I love that. And the brain is a powerful thing. I love the neuroscience behind a lot of those habit formations. The dopamine hit, that's a real thing. Our brain's constantly looking for dopamine. It seems like, especially in our world today, there's so many different triggers for that. But yeah, if we can mark a few things off and say, hey, I won that each and every day. That's powerful. That builds momentum and really helps get the ball rolling, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And that I can hear the people saying like, but I don't have the time. I can't change everything. I want to have my lifestyle as it is. This is where habit stacking is really powerful.
Yeah.
When you could, stack a new habit, desirable habit along with something you already do. I don't care if it's good, bad, whatever, do it along with it. You watch Netflix or you doom scroll on social, combine it with walking or combine it with, something that you want to do. Listen to a podcast as you walk, simple things like that. The other powerful technique, Chad, is reframing, because I get a lot of like, this is where the excuses come from. We state something exists, the ergo that thing prevents me from doing something. And really you got to reframe that kind of stuff and say, well, no, I can do it and I'm going to figure out how, here's why, or reframe it as a positive. Don't say like, I have to drink beers. Like I just drink beer on the weekend. It's what does beer give me? And then what do I want to change, to get the same thing? That's easy. Anyway, I go down rabbit holes. There's so many techniques. Yeah.
Number one, I really like the habit stacking idea. Absolutely powerful. Here's the thing. If you don't have time in your day to do all of these extra things, what are you already doing that you can use as your anchor habit and just tag something else along with it? Here's one area that I recently had success in. So we all go to the dentist, once or twice a year, right? And they're like, hey man, you been flossing? Nope. Just before I came, I did, and so one day I'm like, you know what? I understand the importance of dental hygiene. I brush regularly several times a day, all that stuff. I want to be 70, 80 years old and still have my teeth. So I'm like, all right, I need to floss more. But in all of my life, I've never been able to find a time to be consistent with my daily flossing. All right. Not the sexiest habit in the world, but it's one that is important. And so what I began to do is I'm like, all right, what do I do every day? And so I'm like, you know what? I take a shower every day. I'm going to put some floss in my shower. And every day when I shower, I'm going to floss, toss it, and I'm good. And building that simple habit stacking has made it to where I floss almost every day. That sounds really kind of, silly, simplistic, but there's power in that. What are you already doing every day where you can tag something on to that? Everybody needs that anchor. Everybody needs that trigger. And if you don't have time to create a new trigger to start a new habit, use something you're already doing. It already exists. Just take advantage of it. To me, that's working smarter and not harder.
You're not the only one that flosses in the shower. I don't, but I've heard it quite often. It's funny because we will cling to our habits and use them as a barrier or an excuse. But if you can just hijack the habit.
Yep.
An example in food, maybe it's not so much a habit stack so much as replacing a habit is like the cravings people have, the emotional eating. That's a huge topic that comes up all the time.
It is.
But if you're constantly grabbing for something because of a craving in the afternoon, your energy's low, it's 3 p.m., you go and grab the candy or you grab whatever, replacing that with something that satisfies the same itch and craving is a wonderful first step rather than saying, I'm just going to cut it out.
Right.
Because I hear this from a lot of people. Well, I'm trying to cut out this. I'm trying to cut out that. Well, that's your problem. Like, that's not going to work. Like you're trying to floss. Okay. That's not going to work. So there are a lot of techniques like that. It's like being creative and figuring out how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's using the routines we already have, really more efficiently. There was something recently where I snack a lot at night. That's kind of my big kryptonite. And one of the people I was working with really challenged me to sit with that. Sit with that. When you feel that craving to go snack, and we never crave like healthy foods, right? We're like, man, I really want a healthy salad right now.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a sleeve of Oreos or something like that. But sit with it and say, what is it that I'm actually needing? Because it's not the Oreos. We're not made with an innate desire for Oreos. But there's something that I'm suppressing or that I'm rewarding or whatever the case is that I'm using for that emotional eating. So what is it you're feeling? What is it that you're going through that makes you want to do that? That's the root cause. When we try to discipline ourselves out of a habit like that, that's not going to get us very far. But when we understand the root cause behind it, that unlocks a lot of doors for us. So can you walk through that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on is mindfulness. I think we are too distracted and constantly going through life. I will admit that there is a segment of individuals who might have trauma in their past, right?
Sure.
Things from childhood that need to be explored in like a hypnotherapy or a therapy setting. So outside of that, because that's outside my scope, generally it's a combination of that mindfulness and also tools. And by tools, I mean, there are actions you can take that will help unlock the habit eventually. Yeah. So when we talk about food and cravings, for example, one of my courses in my group program, it's kind of silly. I actually talk about taking an orange and I walk through like 10 minutes explaining how to smell and describe the orange, how to peel it and smell the fragrance coming from it, because orange is I find it delicious, but
right.
The shape, the wedges, the texture. And I go through this whole thing as an example of how you don't do this every time you eat. Come on, that's ridiculous. Right. But if you just said, hey, I really love my daughter's baked goods, but I eat too many of them. Yeah. Okay, next time you do that, sit down and actually document how you felt before, during, and after each one. And you might find that first one or two is amazing. And you love your daughter's cooking and you appreciate it and you want to have that and you will always have that first one or two. But then by the time you get to 3, you notice the emotions start to fade and it becomes more of a rote thing and a habit. And you start to uncover the things that aren't serving you and aren't aligning with you. And that helps you kind of reprogram yourself, not a coach. A coach doesn't do that. Right. A therapist doesn't do that. You do that for yourself.
Yeah, so I love the concept of slowing down. The reason I love that is because it's so hard to do. I mentioned, when I first got into pharmacy, I was working at a retail store 14 hours a day, on my feet the entire time, really no lunch break to speak of. And so I developed this habit of really, like, I'd go to the back, because if the pharmacist leaves, the pharmacy has to shut down by law. So I couldn't go anywhere. So I'd go to the back, scarf down food, usually fast food or something of the sort, that someone has brought in, eat in, literally sometimes like 2 minutes or less, get back out there and keep going. Like it was just something I did to prevent hunger. Didn't even taste it. I couldn't tell you if it was good or not. It was just something. And after years of doing that, that habit stuck with me. And so now that I'm in a much slower paced work environment, I still find myself with that, with the temptation to just really fly through my meals. And so I've become more self-aware lately in the last several years of, all right, slow down. Taste what you're eating. Old habits die hard, right? And, there's a lot of value in like smelling your food, tasting your food, being mindful about how we go through this world has really been revolutionary for me. Being mindful around food has been very revolutionary for me because I'm not one who that's ever been a part of my journey. But in the last several years, that's been super impactful on me. So I appreciate you sharing that, especially that about the orange, because I think that's a really vivid illustration because there's so many patterns and shapes and it's the smells, and that's powerful. Now, when it comes to health, all right, we're getting big picture here a little bit. Zoom out. When it comes to health, what do you think is the best measurement of health? Is there a goal that we should all be shooting for? Is that something that's, again, individualistic? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I've never been asked it that way. Like, what is your best measure of health? Because you could say it's a long life, but you could also say it's a long, fit life that where you're functioning into old age. I mean, I think health is personal to an extent, right? But we can still objectively measure it. And I would define it as you being able to function in not optimally, but like do all the things you want to do. That's really what it comes down to be.
Yeah, that's good.
And that means not just now if you're 35 or 45, it's when you're 90, you project who you are then. Are you going to be able to be that person? Right. And this is where we have to like reject some of the standards of old age and have that mindset shift of no, you don't have to be frail.
Right.
Or no, you don't have to die at 70 because you're obese or of an obese weight. But you could actually be fit, strong, picking things up, sitting down, picking things up, pushing things, helping around the house, helping people move stuff, even into your 80s and 90s.
Right.
That's a thing. So to me, that's health, is that long view of health span and lifespan put together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, it is a whole lifespan versus health span thing. Lifespan being how long can we live, but health span being how long can we live well. I really like that. I'm sure you're familiar with Peter Attia,
yes,
physician. So in his recent book, I've really come to like and appreciate a lot of what he has to say. But he likes to say that we should live our lives in a way that allows us to do the things that we want to do in old age with ease. And kind of the way he thinks about this is he says that, everybody needs a list of their centenarian decathlon. So when you turn 100, what 10 things do you want to be able to do? Not decathlon as in, running miles or whatever, but what are the 10 things when you reach 100 years old that you want to be able to do? If you want to be able to squat down and play in the floor and be able to get back up, which is a reality, by the way. Like, I love that you said that. We don't have to just waste away in our older years. It is very much possible for us to be able to thrive in that, seventh, eighth decade of life. But if you want to be able to do those things, then what do we need to be able to do now? Right? We're going to lose a little bit of strength as we age, but we need to be better now than what we want to be then. It is kind of the long-term goal, right? So if I want to be able to get in the floor when I'm 80, 90, 100, and I can barely get in the floor today at 40, there's a problem, and that gives me something to work towards. What's your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's a pretty good representation of what you work through? And then can you talk a little bit about the aging process? What happens naturally as we age? And then what are some things we can do today? A lot of what we've been talking about are these foundational movements. So maybe we can pivot into some of that as we go.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of things that we can probably synthesize together, which is what happens as we age if you don't do anything? And then what do you do to avoid that? And so what happens as we age? We lose a lot of muscle mass. I mean, it's not just some, it is a lot of muscle mass from the age of 30 on, 3 to 5% per decade, and accelerates. It's even more for women. And you will lose that, period. And I've seen individuals, generally it's when they get to their 70s, where you've gotten to the point of a lifestyle of sedentary living. And I included in sedentary, to me, is not having ever lifted weights. So we're going to get to that, because I think that's a non-negotiable. So even if I hear this all the time, well, they're active, they move around a lot, they do chores a lot. It's just not enough to load your body as you age and to counteract it. So what you get is, when you look at the cross section in like an MRI, you might have the same circumference of a thigh, but it's all fat and this sliver of muscle. Right. Whereas when you were half that age, it was like half and half. Yeah. And if you actually work at building it, it's majority muscle and a little bit of fat. Right. Huge difference in trying to hold up this physical person you are and do stuff. Right. So to me, building muscle and strength is the non-negotiable of all of this. Yeah. And once you prioritize that as numero uno, like top of the list, no question. You can't be a run. I mean, you can run, but being a runner, moving, walking, that's fine. But that's not going to solve this issue. You've got to load your skeleton. Once you've got that, guess what happens? The other stuff like food and fueling that lifting starts to align really nicely and get easier and more time efficient. So it's like fitting those lifting sessions in, as much as it's a habit change now, will pay off across the board in your life with everything.
100%. Yeah. There's not only muscle mass, but there's bone strength. And there's different activities that we can do between now and then. What are some of those foundational movements that you like to focus on?
Yeah, I think if you think of how we move, right? Like you said, we have movement patterns. Yeah. You squat, you pick things up, you push things away from you, you push things overhead, and you pull things. Yeah. And some people categorize them into like 5 or 6, but you think of the movements that go along with that and loading those, and that naturally takes you to the back squat, to the deadlift, to the overhead press, to the bench press, to the row, and all the fun variations of those, right? Yeah. And I'm not dogmatic about it. Like, there's some people that you have to do this, you have to do that. I just say you have to load them and progress, and have a structured program to progress over time. That's all you have to do. I think that answers the question. It's actually it's that simple. And then it's finding a program to do it and what principles that you need to apply to actually get stronger. Yeah. So we can get into that.
So those are kind of the foundational movements, and as we progress, as we lift more weights, and as we move our bodies in those ways, then, hey, it's just going to be natural that we're going to be able to perform those activities with more and more efficiency. And if we do that at a younger age, hey, that's setting ourselves up better as we get older. I've got more muscle mass, so therefore if I lose muscle mass, I'm still going to be okay.
Yeah, and it's profound, right? It's profound. When you're losing muscle mass, but if you strength train, not only do you arrest that process, you start to build new tissue. And even if you're 70, 80, 90, we've seen studies that show you can build new tissue. I can't overstate the difference where your peers are declining and you're now stopping and going the other way. You are aging yourself back. You're turning back the clock decades. Yeah. Decades. There's a book by, John Sullivan, Sully goes by in the starting strength world, called The Barbell Prescription. Yeah. And he uses the term athlete of aging. Like, think of yourself as an athlete of aging. You're mastering this aging process in an athletic way. And you don't have to be athletic. You just have to get a coach or watch some videos or read some books and practice the skill of lifting weights. And it's going to change your life.
Oh, absolutely. Big believer in weightlifting. Women should lift too. It's a big part of the aging process. It's a big part of, hey, we want to be around to play with our grandkids, and we don't want to be able to just look at them. We want to be able to get in there and play with them and have the best life we can have. And thinking about that years ahead takes some forethought, and it takes some discipline, but it also takes being smart. And that's where I really like where you come in, because you're teaching us techniques that, you're not having to totally change your lifestyle, become a bodybuilder in order to prevent some of this from happening down the road. These are just ways that you can hijack the habits you already have. I like the way you said that. Hijack the habits you already have. You mentioned that a little bit is exponentially more than nothing. And so starting kind of where you are with what you can do, there's no set way this needs to look for each and every person. It's very individualized. And I think that gives a lot of us hope. That gives a lot of us hope that, hey, we can start making a difference right now.
I do this for selfish reasons because some of my favorite clients, since we're talking about men, are men who've, they've gained a little weight over the years. And by little, I mean, they might be 250, 275, 300, 350. I have a new client this week that's well over 350.
Sure.
He's willing to put in the effort. And by effort, I don't mean lots and lots of time and hard work. That's just a grind. I just mean, thinking, thinking and structuring and taking a little bit of advice and putting it into action. And within weeks, within the first 3 weeks, you are going to feel the difference.
Yeah.
You got to give it that just a couple sessions. We're not talking CrossFit. We're not talking about, group classes. Those wipe people out and they discourage people when they're new to it. Right. Cause you want to puke, you feel like you want to puke. And unless you're of that mindset, you know what I mean? That like athletic competitive mindset, it's not for most people.
True.
But when you just do some squats and deadlifts, and then you go in Wednesday and you add 5 pounds, you go in Friday, add 5 pounds. By the end of that week, you feel like you've accomplished so much, but not only that, you feel it in your muscles. Like I had a client the other day say, look, I'm not sore. You get sore initially, but he's like, I'm not sore. But when I was doing this other lift, I could feel my muscles responding. Like I can feel them getting engaged and like being part of my body for the first time in a long time.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, it feels good to me that their life is going to be changed. And the losing weight part's going to be easy. Like that's easy. Once you're like, I need to fuel my lifting and my body and treat it with the respect it deserves.
I feel my best when I'm working out on a regular basis. And by working out, I mean lifting weights. That's when I feel my best. I've gone through phases of, I've run, my wife and I before kids, we would run half marathons. We did that for a while, and there was a season for that. And, there's something to be said for achieving your goals. And, I'm friends with a lot of runners and I get that. But for me personally, where I find that I'm at my best is when I'm working out on a regular basis. My muscles feel strong. My mind feels strong. And really, when you step into that, it feels great.
Yeah, it's primal. And there are studies that look at mental health outcomes and have compared lifting weights to behavioral interventions to placebo, like nothing. And they find the behavioral interventions give a little burst of improvement, then you regress. Lifting weights gives you months of sustained improvement in your mental health.
Yeah.
Lifting weights, walking's great too, for it. Right. And it's funny you mentioned cardio because I had a guy on the show, his episode will be coming out soon, who, runs about 60 miles a week. He qualified for the Boston Marathon, but he's also lifting weights, 2 or 3 days a week.
Okay.
And he's kind of managing the recovery just right so that he could actually get all of his goals. However, he has seasons, like you said, he focuses on one thing at a time. He focuses on, okay, now's the off season. I'm lifting weights. The running is dialed back. Okay, now I'm cranking up the running. I'm cranking up the food. I'm down to one or 2 days a week, kind of cycling through that because he loves going after these goals, and that's fine. And it's an extreme that's worthwhile as a human being to like push yourself. But then over the long term, it all balances out, right? Yeah. And you're always lifting weights no matter what. Yeah.
There's something to be said for setting a goal and reaching it, for pushing your body to the point where, wow, it can do something pretty cool. And
you don't have to do cardio, by the way. Yeah, just for the guys listening.
Yeah.
You actually can do zero cardio. In fact, my very obese clients, I don't want them doing any cardio initially. I want them walking. Yeah. You know what happens when they walk more? Speaking of health markers, their resting heart rate drops, 10 beats a minute in the first week, another 10 beats a minute the next few weeks. Wow. Like, here you go. It's just moving, moving plus lifting weights.
Moving and lifting, primal activities. It's something that is super, super important as we age, but hey, it's something that makes you feel good. So, Philip, today you've given us a lot of value, given us a whole lot of things to think about as far as ways we can implement, getting healthier, getting fit, lifting weights, becoming stronger, becoming more prepared for the future as we age. And so, hey, for those in my audience that want to find out more about you, where can they go to find you? You've got a podcast, you've got coaching. Yeah,
I'd go check out the podcast. So it's Wits and Weights. Hit follow, get a lot of great episodes just like what we talked about today. And then hit me up on Instagram at Wits and Weights.
Awesome. Thanks, my friend. I really appreciate you being here. What a great conversation this was. I've got so many more questions. We may have to do this again sometime.
So many subtopics about time efficiency. So thank you, Chad. It's been a pleasure.
That's right. Thanks, Philip. Have a great day, my friend.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.